So in this little video, I want to talk about bias and information bubbles. And there are two issues that are pretty troubling when people are getting their news. I was watching a video last night. It was about social media and how we're all in this place where we're getting different news than other people. And then because we get our own news feed, we think that we're right and everybody else must be off because we're seeing all this news. And what's wrong with them? How do they not see it? At any rate, so this had my wheels turning. So the other day I put out a poll. I said, okay, tell me, is Gerdes is in the tank for Biden, Gerdes is in the tank for Trump, or he tries to be fair? Very few, small percentages said for Biden. And that's because there are people here that, believe it or not, think that I'm like just pro Biden or I'm just trying to tear down Trump or anything MAGA. I'm really not. And then there's a larger percentage, maybe 4 or 5 times the size, that said, well, he's in a tank for Trump. Like, no, I'm not. I'm not a MAGA Republican. I am a Republican, but I'm not that kind of Republican. And I go out of my way to make clear the differences because not everybody understands that. And then there was a category, about 80 some odd percent said tries to be fair. I think it was 80%. I have to go back and look at it. But a large majority said, okay, he tries to be fair. Now, I appreciate that most of you understand that. But in the comments below, the comments were more like, well, tries is the operative word. Okay, I get it. Yeah, that's right. I try. So the first step here is to admit your bias. Like, I admit who I am, where I stand, how I see things, and I tell you that. I lay those cards on the table right up front. And that's what you need to do. Now, simultaneously, you need to be confident about what you think is right. And you need to be informed about it, be confident. Like, so I'm confident that Ukraine is on the side of right and Russia is wrong to be the aggressor. I get that. But you also have to have humility to know that you don't know what you don't know. And that's an important piece of this, right? So I have to listen to what you say. So I ask you a lot of questions. I read your comments. I ask polls quite a bit to try to understand, to gauge where you are. So you have to admit your bias, be confident, but humble at the same time. And when I say humble, I don't mean, oh, look at me, I'm humble. I mean, no, seriously, I don't know things. I know a lot. I've paid attention to what's going on. Like, you can't do this for 1,080 some odd days and a few hours a day for that long and not learn things. But at the same time, I also know that I don't know what I don't know. Okay, at any rate, next thing. So you have to include and admit ugly facts. And there are ugly facts. Like, you know, the number of Ukrainians that are being lost on the battlefields, not a happy number. Like, that's bad. The number of times that you see corruption within Ukraine, like, they're weeding it out, but there's still a holdover from Soviet times, and it's still there. So we have to incorporate that and not just whitewash things. And then, you know, I have to check myself and listen, because left to my own devices without listening or informing myself and trying to, like, look at what's going on, like, what are other sources that I wouldn't naturally listen to. You know, I cite, like, Ambassador McFaul very often, because he's hardcore confident, on the right track about Ukraine, but he's someone from the other side of the aisle that I wouldn't naturally agree with on some things, right? So you try to listen to the other side, or even other side of the debate. And now, I'm not listening to them going, oh, I'm going to be persuaded over and maybe Russia's right. I'm not saying that. But I listen to them to understand where they're coming from. So, and anyway, some of the comments were like, well, he's too soft on Republicans and he's sane-splaining Trump. Okay, well, perhaps. Let's say that that's the case. But that could be what's going on. Maybe psychologically, deep down, there's something like that going on. I don't think that's what it is. I think that there's an alternative explanation there. And I think maybe it's that I see things that maybe somebody else who is not seeing the same sources that I would see might see. Like, there could be that effect, or that I've been around conservative and Republican circles enough that I see something differently than maybe you see it. And that's perfectly fair. We can see things differently. And then, again, I listen to other legitimate information sources that maybe you're not listening to or detached from or whatever. And when I say legitimate sources, I don't mean Bob's blog or something like that. I mean, like, legitimate news sources where I'm getting that information. Now, I do listen to the other side and when I say the other side, I don't mean Republican Democrat. I mean, like, I read RT and Pravda and TASS, and I do that religiously, and I do that to understand what they're trying to project, not because I'm thinking, well, maybe they have a good argument here, and sometimes they do have an argument that I need to factor in. But I'm not doing it for that. I'm doing it to try to understand what they're trying to project, what are they trying to say, why are they trying to say it. And then, so with that, we also want to avoid speculation. So what I mean by that is it's very often we get the what right. We're understanding that this fact happened, but we don't necessarily get the why that thing that happened. And that leads us off into left field because we're not necessarily seeing reality anymore, because we're adding motives that weren't there or reasons that they did this that weren't there, and then that brings us the wrong direction. So we have to be careful with that sort of bias, and it's a very, very, very easy trap to fall into. Okay, and then as we're talking about this, I think like other YouTubers, other UA tubers, like those that are confident about supporting Ukraine, we don't all agree on the same stuff. Like, we have different perspectives, and that's okay. In fact, that's healthy, and you should listen to multiple perspectives. You don't just listen to me, you listen to me, and then you compare against Jake and Anders Buck-Nielsen and what ATP Geopolitics says and Greg Terry and so on and so forth, right? You go and listen to all these different UA tubers, and you see different perspectives, and that's healthy. And then make up your mind, and you're an adult, you think through who's really understanding this, and not who's really reaffirming my own biases, but who really is seeing most clearly. And very often I could be wrong, and Jake could be wrong, and Anders could be wrong, and Anna from Ukraine could be wrong, but somewhere in the middle is about where the approximation of truth lies. And so you do it for that reason. And then I also want to say this. Thank you for listening to me if you're on the other side. Like, if you're already a Reagan conservative, this isn't for you. If you're somebody who doesn't see themselves that way, and there's some of you that are MAGA conservatives that are regularly upset by picking on Trump. I'm not picking on Trump. And there are some liberals or those on the left side of the spectrum that are upset because you think I'm being too soft or sane-splaining Trump, and I'm not doing that either. But if you're listening to me and you philosophically disagree with me on multiple points, good on you. This is absolutely what you should be doing. You're choosing to listen to someone that you don't necessarily agree with on everything, and that's how you grow. And so that's very good. And I also want to say thank you to all of you in general, because like I'll see people say things that are patently, well, he must just do this, or he doesn't believe that, or what kind of professor is, or he's not really a professor, or whatever. And then my audience will correct them and say, look, he's trying to be fair. Like, I don't agree with him on everything, but he's trying. And so I deeply appreciate you, and I appreciate you for being civil. Like, that's a hallmark of what I want this community to be, is let's talk through and think through, but be civil with each other. Last couple things. Anyone who says, trust me, bro, or take my word for it, or I'm right and everybody else is wrong, run away from that person, because that's like cult leader kind of stuff. Like, so people that are that, so you have to be confident, but you also have to be willing to be open to other perspectives, and anybody who's not willing to try to at least wrestle with the ideas, be careful with that. And then finally, like, I want to say this, if you are confident, you don't mind being challenged, and that's a hallmark of what to look for a good source. So anyway, all those things I want to put out there to understand bias and information bubbles. I hope that helps you as you're trying to wade through the limited information that's out there, mostly on YouTube. And I think that most UA tubers are trying to do a good job, and we all come from different biases, and that's okay. As long as we understand where we're coming from, and the audience understands, they can process that information. All right. Tell me what you thought about this in the comments below. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the likes and the shares and the subscribes. And thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.